Today I'm at one of America's most famous cemeteries, Forrest Lawn, Glendale. It's a vast cemetery covering over 300 acres. Amongst the graves and interments of over 500,000 people, many stars from film, television and music are buried here.
Gus Kahn, he's the man who wrote the song It Had to Be You.
Gus Kahn was born in Germany in 1886. He was brought to the US at the age of 5. He grew up in Chicago but moved to California in 1933. He was a lyricist and only wrote words for songs, not the music itself. He was a poor singer and did not play the piano. However, he's considered one of America's greatest songwriters. He wrote songs for dozens of early Hollywood films. At the height of his career, he averaged 8 hits per year. Some of the singers and composers he worked with include Judy Garland, Mickey Rooney and George Gershwin. Sadly, he died at the age of 54 following a heart attack at his home in 1941. A decade after his death, his life was immortalised in the film I'll See You in My Dreams, starring Danny Thomas and Doris Day. One of his successful songs was My Baby Just Cares For Me, which was sung by Nina Simone and others.
The Nina Simone version was recorded in 1957, but only became a big hit in 1987 after appearing in a perfume commercial. Gus Kahn also wrote the song Dream a Little Dream of Me, which was covered by the Mamas and Papas and many others. Gus died in 1941 at the age of 54. Grave of Jack Pierce, born in Greece in 1889. He would become a Hollywood makeup artist.
It was Jack Pierce who created the iconic makeup for Boris Karloff in the 1931 film Frankenstein. Jack Pierce was known for being difficult to work with because of his short temper, but he had a good working relationship with Boris Karloff, with whom he worked with on many films. Some of the other films he worked on include the 1932 film The Mummy, the 1935 film Bride of Frankenstein, and the 1941 film The Wolfman, naming just a few. Surprisingly, most of his work was uncredited. In 1946, Pierce is believed to have been fired by Universal Studios for refusing to use the money-saving foam latex makeup. His last job was for the TV series Mr. Ed between 1961 and 1964. The mask worn by Lon Chaney Jr. in the 1944 film The Mummy's Curse is the only surviving piece of Jack Pierce's makeup. Jack Pierce died in July 1968 at the age of 79. The grave of actress Susan Peters. She was born in Washington State in 1921. Her first big part was in the 1942 film The Big Shot, starring alongside Humphrey Bogart. She appeared in over 20 films over the course of her short career. In 1945, her spinal cord was damaged in an accidental shooting. The incident left Susan Peters confined to a wheelchair. Despite her disability, she continued to work in film and theatre. She died of health complications in October 1952 at the age of 31. Actor Richard Dix. His career spanned the silent and sound film era. He appeared in 101 films. His early films were dramas and romantic comedies. He's best remembered for his parts in Cecil B. DeMille's silent version of the Ten Commandments. He was nominated for an Academy Award in 1931 for his part in the film Cimarron. Once a leading man, his career declined into B-movies by the 1940s due to his alcoholism. His final film role was in the 1947 film The 13th Hour. This was one of only 2 films which featured him in a sympathetic light. Dick suffered a heart attack which forced him to retire. He died in 1949 at the age of 56. The grave of actress Blossom Rock. She was born in Philadelphia in 1895. She played the part of Sally, the switchboard operator, in 9 films of the popular Dr. Kildare series, in the late 1930s, early 1940s. But she is best remembered for playing the part of Grandmama in the 1960s TV show The Addams Family. Rock suffered a stroke in 1967 which affected her speech. This would prevent her from taking part in the Addams Family reunion film in 1977.
She died in January 1978 at the age of 82.
Next, we visit the grave of composer Herbert Stern. He was a Broadway composer, but he eventually left the stage to compose background music for films. He was one of MGM's most prolific composers. His composing, adaptation and scoring of the music in The Wizard of Oz is considered a masterpiece. He won an Oscar for this work. Some of his other film work include the films Mutiny on the Bounty, Green Years and the Marx Brothers film Night at the Opera. In 1924, his wife Dorothy committed suicide in front of him by drinking poison. Whilst visiting Scotland in 1947, he suffered a heart attack. He died 2 years later at the age of 68.
Now the grave of Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall are in here. It is usually locked, but we'll try it. Yes.
Humphrey Bogart is an American cultural icon. He was born in New York City in 1899. He's believed to be a distant relative of Princess Diana. He served in the US Navy during World War I. He attempted to re-enlist during World War II, but was rejected because of his age. His acting career started in Broadway shows in 1928. For the first decade of his film career, he only appeared in supporting roles, often portraying gangsters. His breakthrough came in the film High Sierra in 1941, soon followed by The Maltese Falcon, which was released in the same year. In 1942, he appeared alongside Ingrid Bergman in Casablanca. However, the two barely spoke on set. Bergman would later say, "I kissed him, but I never knew him." In 1944, he met his fourth and final wife, Lauren Bacall, during the filming of To Have and Have Not. He was 44 and she was 19. He became a father for the first time at the age of 48 and for the second time when he was 52. Like his close friend Richard Burton, he was a heavy drinker and smoked up to 40 cigarettes per day. He was nominated 3 times for an Academy Award, winning for Best Actor in the film The African Queen. He is ranked number 1 on the American Film Institute's list of the greatest screen actors. Humphrey Bogart died of throat cancer in January 1957 at the age of 57. Bogart was cremated and his ashes are interred in this small niche. Lauren Bacall would outlive her husband by over 50 years. She remarried in 1961, but the marriage ended in divorce in 1969, and this was her final marriage. Bacall was born in New York City in 1924. She began a career as a model before moving on to acting. Her film debut was with Humphrey Bogart in To Have and Have Not. She would eventually appear in 6 films with Bogart. Some of her notable films include The Big Sleep in 1946, Key Largo in 1948, and How to Marry a Millionaire in 1953, where she starred alongside Betty Grable and Marilyn Monroe. She had a long career in acting, and she was 72 when she was nominated for an Academy Award for her part in the 1996 film The Mirror Has Two Faces. Her final film role was in the 2011 film The Forger. She lived in the Dakota Building in New York for many decades prior to her death. She was in the building on the night when John Lennon was assassinated, and she would later recall hearing the gunshots. She suffered a stroke in the Dakota Building on August 12, 2014, and died later in hospital. She was 89 years old. Lauren Bacall was one of the last surviving major stars from the golden age of Hollywood. Although there's no nameplate, her ashes were interred with Humphrey Bogart.
This is the Garden of Remembrance section. And here we have the grave of William H. Daniels. He was a cinematographer from Cleveland, Ohio, and he became the chief camera operator at Universal Studios in 1918 and was promoted to director of photography by 1921. Greta Garbo would insist on his services, and they made 21 films together. His films include the 1960 film Ocean's 11 starring the Rat Pack and Valley of the Dolls starring Sharon Tate. He won an Academy Award for the 1949 film Naked City, and he died in 1970 at the age of 68. Charles Hall, born in Birmingham, England in 1899. He appeared in 50 Laurel and Hardy films, usually as an opponent, and he was the postman in the classic The Music Box. He was also a member of the ship's crew in the 1933 classic King Kong, and he died in December 1959, aged 60. And there's a pub named after him in Birmingham.